and scale, because you can in the cloud. And I think a lot of agencies are going to be looking at that, healthcare.gov, and be seeing that that's an approach that they should be thinking about employing. So, Jan, do you want to highlight a little bit of the IT versus the ops side of the equation from the Arthur Andersen days? Because I think that gives a good example of, from the demo that you did last week, to us bringing it to a real-world use case at the Veterans Affairs and Veterans Administration. Those two camps often don't look at things on a level playing field. And some of your experiences there, I think, are important for the folks to understand.
Sure, Mike. What Mike is referring to is quite an interesting scenario when I was part of the Arthur Andersen team there. I got to be known as what they called a change management specialist. Even though I was never an employee of Arthur Andersen, I was always a 1099er. I had my own office and my own staff and my own Arthur Andersen email and phone, etc. And I attended, meeting after meeting after meeting. And when we would get in, whether it was an internal flow of work or whether it was an external flow of work for organizations such as Turner Construction, the Bank of China, Coty Cosmetics, and many others that we had created systems for, the divide between the IT department and the operating officers and the lead partners of Arthur Andersen was rather extraordinary. And that divide occurs in virtually every organization that you've been exposed to in your young careers, and that Mike and I have been exposed to over our longer careers. They're still there, but back then, or with them, better said, it was really extraordinary. They actually didn't like each other at all, and the result was, somewhat like the existing situation in Congress, where when nobody is communicating, things don't get done. So you wind up, and it occurs today in all kinds of organizations, where you have the user community, whether it's the operations folks here that are processing the physical records of these service people, or whether it's the agencies who are serving them after the fact. When IT needs to get involved, there's always a battle of no pun intended, of who it is that needs to take control. And IT winds up being a roadblock in situations like this, because the user community is dependent upon the IT community in order to implement. Keeping with the military paradigm here, it would be like the troops are marching and they have to cross a river. They've got to wait for the engineers to come in and build a bridge. Well, what we did at my original company, which is where this technology was born and based and bred, was that we created that bridge by eliminating effectively the chasm from one side of the river to the other, and enabled the user community to be able to create their flows of work themselves. And I gave you somewhat of an example when we went through it on last Monday, and as you absorb that training video, you'll see again how elementally simple it is to create unique flows of work that can manage virtually any process, and it doesn't require any IT involvement. So the user community, whatever that process is, the individual players in that process know, because they're working with it, on an hourly basis, day by day by day by day. They know exactly what needs to be done, and not having to convert this to an IT process is a very revolutionary concept, and we refer to it here at CloudTrack as a user-managed process, and it allows the users themselves to very quickly go in and create these processes on the fly. So you can create a new process with, let's say, just a half a dozen steps, in literally 1 or 2 minutes, and then deploy it with real users and test it, and all that can be done in literally another minute or 2, and then as you test it, you quickly see, oh geez, I forgot that Sally needs to be in between step 3 where Mike has it and step 4 where Dr. Gantz has it. We need to put Jan there because he needs to do X, Y, and Z. So you simply go in, a couple of mouse clicks by the actual user itself. You insert me in between Binko and Dr. Gantz, and then you run the test again, and you say, okay, yeah, there it is, that works. So that's the first thing that we do that is quite unique, and so keep that in mind as you're thinking of how these processes are going to be put into play. The other thing, and I covered this when we were together a couple of Wednesdays ago in the auditorium, even though it was a banking scenario, nonetheless the concept plays the same, and I cover it in the training video, and that is the exceptions management capability. Every programmer, or any programmer, can go and create a system that, if everything goes exactly according to plan, it's pretty simple to write a program that's going to manage whatever that process might actually be. When there are exceptions that come into play, and of course when you're dealing in something at the scope of what Mike and I have been talking about with Veterans Affairs, the exceptions are going to be the norm. And what we have done at CloudTrack, again, having worked very closely with literally hundreds and hundreds of users over periods of time, and hearing back or getting their feedback, gaining their feedback, to understand, what the issues were, we kept refining what the concept of the work baskets and what is now known as CloudFlow was, and what everybody demonstrated was, give us a better way to manage the exceptions. Somebody sends me a work basket and I'm supposed to do X, and when I get it, I realize that there's information missing, or there's something that they didn't tell me in their note that came to me. Give me a simple way to be able to get back in touch with that person quickly and put it in an audit trail, so frankly I can cover my backside, because I'm not the one that's holding up the process. The person that sent me that work basket didn't do what they're supposed to do. And look, let's face it, particularly when you're dealing in government affairs and military affairs, everybody wants to be sure that they don't get blamed for something that they weren't responsible for. So this reroute capability that you've seen in the video and you saw when I demonstrated a couple of weeks ago, the ability to click on a single button and reroute that work basket to anybody that is in back of you at that particular moment who's already touched the work basket, is very simple, with the ability to handle notes. So even if going back to our 6-step workflow, if you're at step 5 and the person in step 4 has sent you the work basket, you can reroute that work basket not only back to step 4, but to step 1, 2, or 3, because maybe they forgot to do something that didn't apply to the people in the middle. And then when they complete their task, it bypasses all of those that don't need to see it again, because they've already done what they're supposed to do. and comes right back to you automatically. And that's all done with 2 mouse clicks. And of course, the other big major thing that we do is that modify root button. And again, please refer to the training video. I urge you to watch that training video over and over again until you can literally memorize it and anticipate what's coming, so that as you're thinking about, how you're going to, phrase questions and in time, be with Mike and I, as he said, either on a phone call or a go-to-meeting and in time in person, understanding exactly how these flows work, so that now if I'm the 5th person in this route again and the work basket comes to me and I need to now bring in an expert before I move it on to step 6, which is the final step, but that person has not been involved in this particular flow of work up until now, then if I'm granted a high enough level of authority through the matrix system that we've described to you, then I have that modify route button is lit. I click on that modify route button, and sure enough, it allows me to send that work basket to anybody in the world and ask them for their opinion, and when they're done, it comes back to me. And most importantly, and I'm going to turn this back to Mike here in just a moment, most importantly, every single thing that I've just described is audited as it occurs, and audited in such a way that it can never be altered and never be deleted. I use the expression, and I'll repeat it to you again because it's important. It's one of my clients, the greatest term in the world that any client has ever described our system, in that it's notes to file on steroids. And by having an absolutely clear audit trail that you can prove technologically could never have been altered or deleted, when it comes down to a litigious situation, when it comes down to an external audit, when it comes down to a simple explanation, then you can simply go to the CloudTrack record, point to this living snapshot of the entire flow of work, and be able to, with certainty, be able to say, this is exactly what occurred from point A to point Z on this timeline, from the time that it began until the time that it finished. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Mike, and I know he has something to talk to you about here in terms of the Office of Public Affairs.
Great, and thanks, Shannon. Guys, we don't want to move too fast. We know it's like drinking out of a fire hose, but with timing kind of creeping up, we do still want to be in a position where we're going to start reaching out to the agencies directly, many of which we've already been kind of grooming our handlers and our points of contact to be open to the consideration of the Innovation Sandbox environment. And like we've talked about, we really do want you guys to be with us, jointly, maybe initially observing and participating in the meeting, just to kind of get a feel for how the approach unfolds. But then over time, really as we get into next spring, we want you guys to kind of be in a position where you're taking the lead on particularly the assessments and the IT evaluation of the existing environment that these agencies have in place, and then what is the scope of a sample deployment or a proof of concept that they want to start considering to move into the sandbox.